Hello, everyone. Welcome to UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts. I am Blaine Gilmer. It's Trent Smallwood, Jed May. The team is back together. Everybody's here and talking Georgia football recruiting here on this special Thursday night edition. Had some family stuff had to take care of on Monday night, so we're coming to you here live on a Thursday to talk about what's remaining in Georgia's class of 2024. Also, we debuted the UGA Sports 2025 big board. So a lot to talk about here. Guys, first of all, how are you doing? And, we're down to kind of the nitty gritty here as there's a few spots remaining in this Georgia class.
Yeah, doing good. It seems like it's been forever since we've done this, but there's been, probably 5 or 6 commitments since the last inception of this show with all of us here. So, been busy for sure.
Trent?
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad Jed's finally here. I don't think I've seen him since May. And it's kind of funny to talk about down to the nitty gritty in July, and Georgia's at that spot. They have limited spots left. You could see some decommits and some guys take up a certain position and see guys decommit, but overall, you got what Georgia's got most of their top guys and have very little spots left, and it's going to be interesting to see some of those spots, what position they go to, who they hold out for, and who they push for all the way to signing day.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys that are remaining, this episode is labeled 5-star focus because Trent, there's some big fish still out there, and Georgia's already got a 500-600 point lead right now in terms of the rivals ranking, and there's some guys that could really boost that 20 player average up here pretty quickly in the next 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, you got several guys that could come off the board. Justin Williams, of course, KJ Bolden is announced in the first week of August. You can see Williams Nwaneri to come off the board. So there's I guess he's got an announcement date of August 1st.
August 1st, yeah.
So some big fish on the board, and it'll be interesting to see, if Georgia was to land, say, 2 out of 3 of those guys, the spots definitely get even more tighter moving towards the season.
Absolutely. Jed, what are your thoughts just in general before we get into specifics and answering vault questions? We've seen, kind of the early worries of people being in terms of people on the vault being like, man, the offensive line class is not going to necessarily be in what you're wanting. And, Stacey Searles is struggling. Then boom, a string of 4 offensive linemen come through and then some big guys on the other side of the ball in the trenches. What's just kind of your overall synopsis of this class is where it stands right now?
Yeah, that offensive line class came together really quick. It's a good mix of each guy. I think is a good mix of high upside and also they got a ways to go. High upside, but there's certain things they could add right away, especially the guys that are coming in early. So it's really just mostly each position group has a spot left. A running back as you look at Nate Frazier, receiver trying to take a 4th guy. A guy at defensive line, 3 tech, 5 tech, with Nwaneri, and then Aiden Breland as you look at that 3 tech spot. Inside linebacker is kind of the interesting one because DeMarcus Riddick is still committed to Georgia for now. His decision date is, I think, 2 weeks from yesterday.
26. Yeah.
So there's him, there's Justin Williams, there's Kris Jones, there's Chris Cole. Like that's the one spot where there's a lot of movement left. And then defensive back as well. Peyton Woodyard is being recruited by other teams. Jalen Hayward is being recruited by other teams, and obviously KJ Bolden. So really, a lot of these spots have just got one guy left, except for inside linebacker, where there's a lot of movement still to happen, and defensive back as well, depending on not to say any Woodyard or Hayward or any of those guys are necessarily on flip watch per se, but if one of them were to leave, then that could be something where you see a guy, like a Kyron Jones last year came out of nowhere at the end of the year. Georgia gets him on campus, flips him from NC State, and takes him as a defensive back. That could be something that I would keep my eyes on going throughout the season.
Yeah, and there's still some crazy things yet to happen. I think it's worth talking about Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern getting fired or relieved of his duties there. There's been talk about Brian Hartline at that job, that he could get a look, at least an interview for that job. And Trent, you've kind of kept Jeremiah Smith in your class prediction. That could go a long way towards making that come to fruition if Hartline ends up interviewing over at Northwestern.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I've kind of stuck to that at, and out of the 3 wide receivers that we talk about pretty much all the time with the 5-star wide receivers, I feel like Jeremiah Smith has the best chance to be in that class, just simply because of his relationship with Dylan Raoul. If one, Georgia continues to build that relationship, and I think Brian Hartline's a big reason why he's going to Ohio State. That relationship and what he's built there. So if Brian Hartline starts getting, which I expect him to, he's calling plays this year, even if he don't have that job offer before the season anywhere. But I believe he's going to get several job offers after the season, and it'll be interesting how that plays out come December. I'm not expecting anything to happen with Jeremiah Smith before December, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out come that time.
100%. So now, guys, we're going to get to vault questions here in just a minute, but I wanted to tell everybody that's in here, Jermaine King is in here. Appreciate you. Randy Payne from Tifton. He's always in here with us. We appreciate you. Andy Stowe, long time no see, my friend, for sure. Andy's in here. And then Alex Page, usually over on our Georgia Players section show that we have with former Dogs Tavares King and Noshawn Marino each week. He's over here in the recruiting show with us, and he's got a question for us that we're going to hit for him because he is such a loyal viewer of the programs here. We're going to hit his question first. Guys, what is Kirby telling recruits and their parents regarding all the external stuff going on, like AJC articles, speeding tickets, etc.? Though, he said it's not really affected recruiting. How much do you think that has to come up in conversation, and how much do you think the UGA demanding a retraction of that article by Alan Judd and those guys over at AJC was also not only standing up for themselves, but kind of messaging to future recruits saying, hey, we don't stand for this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at the transcript of that of the meeting with beat writers that Dash put out, and someone asked Kirby, if I was the parent of a recruit, I would be asking about this because it's certainly garnered a lot of headlines. But I think, even before this incident and all through the year, connection and family and all that kind of stuff is something that is hammered home when Georgia recruits these guys. And I think they have been consistent in their messaging of, hey, this was a horrible accident. We mourn. I mean, a lot of these this is a Chandler LaCroix, especially, was someone a lot of these recruits and their parents knew, right? I mean, how much has Dylan Raiola talked about that when we've had him on? So I think, you got to do what you can because that it's being bandied about by your rivals, right? The culture issues and all this kind of stuff. So I think the messaging has been, our culture is good. It's fine. This is I don't know if isolated incident's the right word, but Kirby Smart's addressing it, even though he says this isn't about recruiting, whatever. It all ties into recruiting at some point. So, he's addressing it. He's standing up for his players, the culture he's built, even as rivals kind of try to chip away at it.
Yeah, I think Georgia's more under the spotlight because of the wreck and because of the tragedy that happened in Athens. I think the speeding's happening all over the country, and I don't think it's not say it's right, and not saying it's right by any means, but I think it's happening all over the country. But I think it's being spotlighted at the University of Georgia because of the incidents that have happened. I think speeding is an issue not at the University of Georgia just per se. I think it's the issue all over the country with the drag racing and all that stuff because it's happening everywhere. But I think Georgia's more under the spotlight because of what's happened. Is it affecting recruiting? I know parents are probably asking questions, and rightfully so. But I do think that I don't necessarily think Georgia is hurting in recruiting because of the speeding issue. I think there's several people making bad choices, but overall, I think it's I think it's a question the parents are asking, but I don't think it's, damper anything.
No doubt, no doubt. I think it is something that I know for a fact that KJ Bolden's family had that conversation with Kirby Smart and had to see what was in place and things like that, and Kirby Smart and company, they're telling these guys, hey, we've got Gant there that helps mentor guys. They bring in Georgia State Patrol to help talk to people and things of that nature. But there's two sides of this story. You can admit that there's an issue that needs to be resolved, and you can also say, hey, there's been people out there sensationalizing it and things like that. And I think that's what Georgia was trying to do, especially on the story about that Georgia rallies, quote unquote rallies around people accused of sexual abuse and stuff like that. And I think that's what really riled up Kirby Smart the most, because he was pretty contrite about the speeding, saying, hey, yeah, it's a problem and we got to fix it. And he's going to try to get it done. He said he didn't know if you could, quote, eradicate speeding unless you just take guys' keys away from them, which, Jed, I don't think, they're not their mom and dad. I don't know if they can really do that either. But I mean, they could kind of tell them, hey, if you go driving this weekend, you're not going to play. Maybe something like that. But I don't know if they could, just take away somebody's car or something from them. But yeah, interesting stuff that has to be looked at, and stuff that is going to be an impact when you're under the microscope. Like Trent said, when you're at the top of the mountain, people put more emphasis on stuff. So now, guys, let's go ahead and hit some of these vault questions. But before we do, got to give a shout out. You see the logo there on the bottom right hand of the screen. We're presented by Julie's Bookkeeping. I put in the comments of the YouTube section there that, guys, rumors versus facts, and you see it at the bottom. It is presented by Julie's Bookkeeping. If you want a company that is run by Georgia fans, that you can help out and that they can help you out, well, then Julie, the bookkeeper, Julie's Bookkeeping is the place for you. Did you know that outsourcing your bookkeeping for small businesses can make you more profitable by $7,000 a year, because you're not wasting your time and your efforts doing something that you kind of halfway know to do? You're paying somebody that knows exactly what they're doing to save you that time and effort and make sure everything is correct, whether it's financial statements, tax preparation, all this kind of stuff. And they can help you out with some decision-making process too. You can get a free 30-minute consultation by using godogs.julie, the bookkeeper. That's Julie, the bookkeeper, bookkeeper.com. That'll take you directly into their calendar where you can get a 30-minute free consultation. Jed, this is a family that loves the dogs and wants to be able to help dog fans.
Yeah, I mean, what more could you want? You don't have to go to a Georgia Tech fan for this. You don't have to go to a Florida fan for this. You can go to somebody who, supports the team that you support as well. So, like Blaine said, go to their website, set up a free consultation, and then start saving yourself some money.
And Jed would save a lot more than $7,000 because he's a national analyst and he gets paid the big bucks.
Right, mucho dinero, because every recruiting ranking decision it belongs to Jed. So that, I mean, the amount of salary that has to be doled out for that kind of decision making process is immense.
And the fact that Georgia's over 3,000 points in July is a big reason, Jed's where he's at right now. So
yeah, we're still working on how we're going to slide Alabama up to get over it at the beginning or at the end with the Bama bump and all, but we'll get there. But yeah, all the decisions run through me. So Dylan Raiola, number 1, Williams Nwaneri, number 3, number 1 defensive prospect in the country. Georgia could get number 1 on both sides of the ball. So
but if he commits elsewhere, he's dropping. So
right, yeah, of course.
So Julie's bookkeeping, and they can take care of you.
No doubt. Jed's in that higher tax bracket, so Julie has to really work hard to try to find ways to drop down and save him some money every April, but it is what it is. But guys, check out Julie's Bookkeeping, Julie the Bookkeeper. You can go to godogs.juliethebookkeeper.com to schedule your 30-minute free consultation and see how they can save you and your business money today. Okay, so now let's get to our vault questions. Jed, we got one from your guy up in Pennsylvania.
PA Dog, yeah, I was just up in northeastern Ohio last week. What are y'all's feelings on KJ Bolden?
All right, so reports everywhere, all over the place. We've talked to sources close to him. Trent, if you had to handicap this thing right now with an August 5th decision looming, how do you feel this one's going right now?
I mean, I still like Georgia personally. I think Georgia, from a relationship standpoint, that what they've built over the past several years, not only with Kirby, but you got Muschamp and you got really the whole staff's recruited him over the last couple of years. I think relationship standpoint that Georgia sits right there amongst the top. I think FSU's come on late. I know several schools have come on with the NIL. I think I still think when it comes down to the end, I do like Georgia right now, but several schools have tried to make a push in different ways than they've tried to build a relationship, but they've taken different ways to try to get them.
Jed, you've talked to some other recruits about this situation, some recruits that maybe are familiar with what's going on or are close to KJ. What's the sentiment from other members of this class, how they feel this one could shake out?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk to guys and you ask them, "Hey, who are you recruiting?" Every single one of them says KJ Bolden. It seems like no matter who it is. So I think there's confidence from the Georgia side, like you said, Trent. They've built a relationship with him. Georgia's built a relationship with him for years. There's the Montgomery Van Gorder angle, of course, to another Buford alum. Donut Dog will tell you that this was destined to go somewhere else because KJ goes to Buford. So I don't know. I mean, this is certainly, earlier this spring, it seemed like a lot more of or closer to a done deal sending KJ to Georgia. That does not feel like the case anymore. I think Ohio State has a real chance. I think Georgia obviously has a real chance. I wouldn't discount Florida State. There's Alabama. I mean, all these schools are in it. It's like you said, there's the NIL has become a part of this thing. So I don't know. If you made me pick, I would pick Georgia. Would I, bet the house or my 9-figure salary on it? No, I wouldn't. So, but if you made me pick, I would pick Georgia. But it's one, and people have alluded to this on the board too. I think this is going to be one that it's not going to be over. It's going to be a 4-month from August 5th until signing day, where it's not going to be over till December 20th or whatever that early signing day is.
I'll tell you this, at one point, and I'll just kind of pull the curtain back. At one point, this was like done deal. He was about to go in and say, "Hey, we're pulling the trigger. We're going to publicly come out and be a Georgia Bulldog." And then in the last, couple weeks or so, it's really started to open back up. Trent has talked a little bit about NIL with some other schools and things like that. Yes, there are schools, there are collectives, things like that, making offers, counter offers, all this kind of stuff. But I want to just be really, really transparent and blunt with people. Every single school that is having success recruiting is utilizing NIL, Georgia included. Georgia goes about it in a little bit different way because they don't want to upset the apple cart on their roster and try to keep a roster together. So they their collective tries not to, go crazy with incoming freshmen and stuff like that in terms of numbers, not Nico Iamaleava territory and stuff like that. But it's not like Georgia's not utilizing NIL. There are some schools, Trent, that utilize it a little bit heavier when it comes to the incoming freshmen. And I think that's what you're seeing in some of these cases.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get and like you said, from a roster standpoint, that's where you get your team in trouble. I think when you have an incoming freshman coming in, being offered a certain amount, and you have a rising junior who's an NFL prospect, not getting as much as that upcoming freshman, I think that's where feathers start to get ruffled on the roster. I think you saw that at Texas A&M. a few years ago when they landed the number one class. And Georgia's just simply not going to match some of the offers out there for prospects around the country. They're just simply not. They're not going to play that game. And Kirby is as bad as you want to see or fans want to see Kirby go out and match some of these offers and start playing the NIL game. I think you're taking a big risk with your roster. I think that is, it's a sharp-edged sword right there you're battling, and I don't think Kirby wants to go that route at this point because you're really that can affect your roster, and I've seen it several times already.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely a double-edged sword there where you got to try to figure some of that stuff out. Now, Jed, we got another one from Chris Landino. I think first time question from Chris Landino on the vault.
Yeah, are there any safety prospects the staff could flip their focus on if Peyton Woodyard flips and KJ Bolden decides to go elsewhere?
Yeah, I was looking at the Rivals rankings of safeties and things like that. There's a couple of guys who are committed elsewhere, like Noah Dixon, who's a LaGrange guy from Troop. Just Georgia tried to get in on a guy like that because he's an in-state guy. Of course, Xavier Filsaime was at one point coming to take an official visit to Georgia, but he's committed to Florida out of McKinney, Texas. He canceled that visit once he locked everything down with Florida. So, I mean, there's possible names there that could end up maybe getting in the picture. But Trent, I'm not so sure. Like if just one of those guys, let's say, for example, Hayward or Woodyard ended up, saying they're going elsewhere. If KJ Bolden were to commit to Georgia, I don't know that Georgia feels they absolutely have to go out and get another safety.
Yeah, I don't either. And Kam Mikell is still sitting out there with who can play several positions in the secondary. So
good point.
I think Georgia has they have a few guys in mind that they could turn to, but I think they're going to continue to recruit this position. These guys at this position, and if something turns south, I don't think you would see Georgia panic and go out there and try to find a safety unless they lost two of the guys. I think you would if you lost two of the if you lost out on KJ Bolden and lost a current commit, you could see Georgia going out and searching for another safety, but I think they would be satisfied with two.
Yeah, I don't think there's a huge need with what they brought in the last class. I think a couple would be just fine. All right, Jed, we got one from Mac Gata over here.
Yep, next three commitments.
Well, we all know that Justin Williams he told me he's going to be making a decision sometime before the end of July. And I put a note out on the vault, I think it was sometime last week saying, I remember it was July 8th. And I said, hey, it's July 8th about 9:00 at night. And I said, I think Georgia's in as good a position as anybody to land Justin Williams and Williams Nwaneri before the end of July. Didn't know at that point that Nwaneri was going to announce August 1st, so that could be a little bit problematic. One day off and leaking into August. But Oklahoma, of course, is trying everything they can to make sure that he doesn't go to Georgia. But on Justin Williams' front, guys, I think Georgia's really got to like where they sit there. That could end up being the next commit for Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, you look at those two, and then Christopher Jones, who has told us, late July, early August. So in that, say you start on July, 20th, the next 2 to 3 weeks after that, you can see all three of those guys go. So I think it would be those three guys. I mean, I don't think when you look at these receivers, not that Georgia's necessarily the favorite for any of them anyway, but the Mike Matthews, the Jeremiah Smith, the Wingos, those are going to go into the fall, it looks like. Nate Frazier is expected to go into the fall. And I guess you throw KJ Bolden in there too. So between Williams, Nwaneri, Bolden, and Kris Jones, I think those would be the pool of guys that you could see pop at some point in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that Justin Williams decision syncs up with the decision of Riddick, who's making his final decision on July 26th. Everyone likes to think Kirby Smart controls all these dates and always has good news after bad news, and not saying what's going to happen with Riddick, but it's interesting that that's happened at the end of July, and both of these are happening at end of July. So see what order they fall in.
Yeah, if it is one after the other, and Justin Williams, as we all feel right now, is trending towards Georgia. We feel like the addition of his teammate Joseph Janae really helps bolster things there. Kirby doesn't like to let bad news linger, and if Riddick ends up choosing Alabama, it wouldn't be surprising if Williams hadn't already pulled the trigger at that point that he could go quickly after. So that's a great point there, Trent. So if y'all had to say three, Jed, you're saying probably Williams, Jones, and then
I'll go Nwaneri. I think Jones is kind of the one without a date of the four, but I'll throw him in there as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that one, unless Nate Frazier decides to go ahead and pop. But it seems like that one may drag out a little bit longer. Trent, he may with Alabama trying to turn up the heat, he may wait and take another couple of visits in the fall.
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, when you look at who's left on the board, those three, along with KJ Bolden, are kind of the next four. Aiden Breland is probably going to go into the fall. You got, those four just make the most sense. I don't see anybody just popping out of nowhere. I think Georgia's got their are happy with where they sit right now, and are just trying to add, a few of the big boys remaining. So I don't see any surprise happening. I think it's between those four who's going to be the next three, and it could, if Georgia misses on one of them, could go to KJ. So I think it'll be three out of those four.
Yeah, for sure. And do we know a date yet for Mike Matthews' decision, Jed? We know that Georgia, Georgia's got to listen. It's going to be a battle if they want to be considered there. Tennessee probably the prohibitive favorite at this point, but I can confirm that Georgia is still pushing very hard for Mike Matthews, and really, really trying to make sure they're involved in that. So do we have any update on when that might happen?
No, I was asking around about that this week and haven't really heard anything. So his easily could go in the fall. Jeremiah Smith, like you said, Trent, if there's going to be any movement, it won't be till December most likely. So no update there. I mean, Mike Matthews could do what everybody else does and commit before the season, or he could take it out and take some more visits into the fall. I think that would help Georgia if it went into the fall, went deeper into the fall. Showcase the offense, and with Carson Beck and all those guys a little bit. Although, and I mentioned this in my story the other day, if Georgia hasn't proven itself to him at this point, what more can you do? But nonetheless, I feel like it might, the longer Georgia can stay in his ear and all that, I think it might be a little better. But no firm decision timeline for Mike Matthews as of now.
I would say one of the ones that we haven't talked about is Chris Cole. If Georgia was to miss on it, linebacker, I know he wants to decide before the season. And I think he announced his top 8 recently, and Georgia was amongst that team. But I think that's a name that could pop up if Georgia missed on a couple guys, and I think he'd probably be next in line. And he's got a summer announcement date, or doesn't have an announcement date, but plans on announcing before the season.
C-Buck 11 wants us to talk about the latest on Williams Nwaneri. Of course, we know how talented he's, like you said, Jed, he's the number one ranked defensive player in the Rivals rankings, and he's a guy that Georgia got the last crack at the end of June with a kind of impromptu, unofficial visit where he made a trip down to Atlanta to see family and made his way over to Athens during that process. Georgia has kind of been viewed to be behind Oklahoma leading into that. But talking to some sources around this, even though that I think there's people on both sides of Georgia and Oklahoma feeling good about this right now. But definitely, I don't think there's anybody that we've talked to around on the Georgia side saying, no, we'll see if they can land him. I think there's some confidence being espoused there.
Yeah, and I mentioned this on the board today. I wouldn't bet any of my Lamborghinis on Georgia or Oklahoma. I think it's those two, and then he took an, like you mentioned, that weekend visit to Georgia. That came literally hours after an official to Missouri. So Missouri's in there. They're the home state. I would say they're probably behind Georgia and Oklahoma. But it's a battle. I think the thing to watch with that August 1st commitment date, does he go anywhere that last weekend in July? I think Oklahoma has like a cookout or something that they're trying to get a lot of talent in for. Obviously, that would be huge for them if they got Nwaneri back on campus for that. So I don't know. It could go either way. Like you said, there are Georgia sources that feel good. There are Oklahoma sources that feel good. It legitimately, each has had momentum kind of their own accord over the last couple months. And it's going to be a battle. I mean, it just is. It's going to go all the way down to the end. I don't know that Williams has his mind made up right now. And it could go either way as of right now. But I think Georgia has as good of a chance as Oklahoma or Missouri. They're as well positioned as anybody.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think Georgia, Oklahoma. If NIL becomes a big part of this, I think Missouri will throw the book at them like they did Luther Burden. That with those in-state Missouri kids, that they tend to throw a lot at those kids, but at the same time, this is another kid that speaks with Dylan Raola, another kid that's built a relationship there. That I know those two talk a lot, and I think Williams is got to know some of the Georgia commits and communicated with them as well. So that one will be interesting. I think Georgia, whichever way I think it could go, Georgia's way I think it could go, Oklahoma's way. I think both of the schools are confident, and like Jed said, see where he shows up at the end of July. I think that's a big tell, and I don't think he's going to come back across the country to Georgia, but it would be better off if he didn't go anywhere, or maybe went to something at Missouri rather than going to Oklahoma. I think if he goes to Oklahoma, that would push all the momentum that way.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And guys, when we talk about NIL and things like that, a guy like Williams is, and we're talking about Williams Nwaneri, not Justin Williams, but a guy like Williams Nwaneri is a guy that legitimately we're talking about an NIL that could command north of $25,000, $30,000 a month type from these collectives. So this is big money that people are talking about. Don't know if that's necessarily what a team like a Georgia would want to do. But Georgia has lots going forward in terms of the connection to Uzodiribe, Nwaneri of Nigerian descent. We've seen that play a fact with some other prospects. So we'll see how that comes into play. Also, the NFL development, things of that nature. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But right now, I do feel like it's kind of close, but I feel like Georgia's like Jed said, really, really in the thick of it and has a lot to sell. So the Boy Racer 45 says, assuming Justin Williams commits, which may have already happened by RVF this weekend. So this was written on Monday, I think, but so that hasn't happened yet. And Riddick decommits. Who do you see being the ILB2 in the class, Kris Jones or Chris Cole? If you had to pick one, Trent, are you still thinking Kris Jones over Cole at this point?
Yeah, I would think Kris Jones over Chris Cole. I know Chris Cole's up there, and I know Georgia likes him a lot, but I think Kris Jones would be the next guy.
Yep. JP Shooters on YouTube says, is there a UGA cookout? Yeah, they're going to have the dog days of summer. A lot of that is 2025 guys coming in, and we're going to be talking about the 2025 big board, but who knows? They've pulled in some 2024s that have come to that in the past. Boy Racer 45 had a follow-up question. He said, how would you rank the 6 OL commits just based on long-term potential? So Jed, if you had to look at the 2025 offensive or 2024 offensive line commits that Georgia has, and you had to look into the future and say, okay, these are going to be the best guys when it's all said and done, how would you go about ranking them?
Oh man, I'm so used to ranking kids. This should be easy. I mean, Daniel Calhoun I think it's probably Calhoun and maybe Nair Daniels 1 and 2, just because they're both big guys that move really well. I mean, Nair Daniels is a literal monster. So those two guys, I think a guy like Michael Luini, who's got that long athletic tackle frame.
And he's physical, man.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, and I mentioned this earlier, you can make a case for all these guys, and this isn't trying to blow smoke or whatever, but all these guys have tremendous upside. And I think, in some other classes, there have been guys that, these guys don't seem like as much of, in my opinion, like lottery tickets as maybe some guys in other classes, in previous classes, where these guys, you can easily talk yourself into saying, okay, this guy's going to contribute, this guy's going to contribute. And that's what Georgia needs, as they look to restock this offensive line room. So I don't know, that's a long way of saying I don't really have a top 6 list, but I think all these guys have the thing I'm most interested to see with this class is who, if any, ends up playing guard. Like, I think Daniel Calhoun could easily end up at guard.
Somebody's going to have to.
Yeah, I mean, Malachi Tolliver maybe could end up at guard, but when you got all these 6'7", 6'8" frames, like that's a tough ask to kick in a guard. So that's what I'm most interested to see. I think Daniel, like I said, Calhoun could be a guard and could be a really effective, road grader type lined up next to.
Does somebody get moved to center? They don't have a center in the class. Can
When
anybody
I
snap?
spoke with Daniel Calhoun's high school coach, he's like, yeah, he can snap. He's done it. So not to say that we're breaking any news that Daniel Calhoun's moving to center, but it could be tried. You got to get those interior guys, and Blaine, I'm sure we're going to talk about the big board for 25 at some point, but that's where you're seeing a lot of these interior guys like Cortez Smith and SJ Alafatuli and guys like that, where they're really going to try to restock those guys on the inside. Whereas this class, you're really looking at more of the prototypical tackle frames that you're bringing in.
Trent, instead of maybe going through all 6, just say maybe top 2. Who do you think long-term potential could be the best 2 out of the 6?
I would say Daniels 1 and Calhoun 2, and then Easley and Ewing in that second tier. I think that would be the second tier. I think the top tier. I think Nair Daniels has the highest ceiling of all 6 of them. I think with his size and his ability to move, and the fact that he's probably going to be a tackle. He's not going to move on the inside. So if you're looking at the most valuable, I think that would be the most valuable, Nair Daniels in this class.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Ditto on all those sentiments right there. So, Jed, we have one from D Franklin 31 here.
Yeah, how many times this cycle have you been told a recruit is going to commit to Georgia only to have that go awry? And where do you foresee that occurring with remaining commits that UGA leads for?
I can think of 2 specifically in this class. Everybody knows Joseph Phillips. Like, everybody in the world was told he was going to commit to Georgia because he told Georgia he was going to commit to Georgia. And then he told us that he was going to commit to Georgia. And then Auburn ended up being the school a couple of days before it all kind of switched. So that was one definitely that went elsewhere. And then
it's more of a, like, not necessarily a kid goes somewhere else, but you'll hear something is imminent, and then the timeline gets switched or whatever. I think that is what has happened in this class, maybe more so than the Joseph Phillips situation was wild because it just switched on a dime pretty much. Michael Uini was a little bit like that, not necessarily that things went awry, but just
in reverse.
Yeah, no one really knew coming out of that official visit like where he was going to go. There hadn't been a whole lot of Georgia traction there, and our Michigan site felt very confident about it, and then think it was the night before his commitment or the night before that, everyone started hearing Georgia at once. So, but yeah, I think it's more so of things go from imminent to down the line, imminent to dates get announced later, more so than, it's going to be one school and then it switches. I think it's more of a timeline, or has been more of a timeline thing lately anyway, than switching schools.
I mean, Trent, I think KJ Bolden could fall into that kind of category there.
Yeah, I think this is a situation where Georgia's had numerous silent commits throughout the spring and the summer. And I think a lot had to do with the fact that a lot of these kids were trying to save a spot because they knew Georgia was filling up. And I mean, there's several that are uncommitted that probably won't end up in this class or Georgia's class because of the number situation, who were silent commits at one time or, told Georgia they were coming at one time. So I think there's, there's been a few for sure, but I think, it's either been a numbers thing or they've chose elsewhere, like Joseph Phillips. So see what happens with KJ, because like you said, he's another one that falls in that category. Daniel Calhoun was one that, kind of started, scaring everybody. And he's one that told Georgia back early June. And, and then after Alabama and came on strong and several other schools, he elected to go to Georgia. But, that was another one that, had us on our tiptoes for a while.
Yeah, I think Carter Nelson was a guy that was really fell in love with Georgia during his official visit and was telling a lot of the commits and telling a lot of people, staff and stuff like that Georgia's kind of where he wanted to be. But then he gets back to Nebraska and realizes he's got to drive, few hours to get to an airport and then fly a few hours to get to Georgia if you want to do that. And he's very close to his family and all that kind of stuff. So he said, hey, I'll just stay home and go to Nebraska. So there's stuff like that happens. Guys have that feeling when, hey, this is where I want to be on a visit, but then they go home and they realize, oh, well, there's some other factors I have to consider here and stuff like that. So those are some examples of things that would come into play there.
I think Fletcher Westfall was another guy that fell in that category. And not necessarily that he told Georgia he was coming, but I think Georgia simply ran out of room at the position. And,
these guys that have committed the last few days, it's all of a sudden it's boom, Georgia spots are filled just kind of out of nowhere, and there's no more room at the end.
Yep.
On YouTube, Jay Elliott says, with Georgia pulling more out-of-state talent, that leaves more Georgia boys for others to recruit. What other school benefits the most? I think Clemson benefits from Georgia being more of a national brand.
South Carolina,
Auburn with Hugh Freeze there is going to benefit from that a good bit. What other schools y'all think?
I think Florida does. I think Georgia recruits Florida so well, and I think Florida benefits from Georgia landing those top guys and comes up and lands some guys from Georgia. Florida State is big in South Georgia, and of course Auburn and Clemson have always been there. So, yeah,
I mean, Tennessee tries to recruit Georgia very hard. I mean, the talent level of high school players in East Tennessee is not great, so they're going to dip into Georgia a lot as well. And
the amount of Georgia kids that I've heard that's interested in Michigan and Ohio State has been a lot more this year than in before. I think, there's a lure to go up north and play at Michigan, Ohio State.
100D6904 says, I know it's early, but if you had to pick a top 5 for players in the 2024 class to make the biggest impact as freshmen, who would you pick? You can include players that you think Georgia gets. So as a freshman,
you're being tricky. Of course, you got to say Dylan Raoul is one. Depending on what happened with Carson Beck, I think he could come in and make an impact. I think Chauncey Bowens is a guy that could come in and make an impact year one. Do what?
Is that him and Dwight Phillips? Because Phillips' skill set is very unique and dynamic. You can line them up all over the place and that kind of stuff. With Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards, set to leave after this year. That was my thought too.
I would say Nikar as a guy that come in play. Even Nitro, I think, is a guy that come in play year one. And Ellis Robinson and Justin Williams, I would say those two. I think it's harder to play on the offensive line as a freshman, so I'm going to leave the offensive line out. I think Georgia's pretty stocked up at tight end, even though they have two good ones coming in. So I would say those five: Justin Williams, Nye Carr, Chauncey Bowens, Dylan Raiola, and Ellis Robinson.
Yeah, if I was ranking them, I'd rank Raiola, given, thinking that Beck goes pro after having a good year. That would be one. I would rank Jaden Riddell in there because I think he's going to be a monster. I'd put him in there. I'd rank Drew Miller in there because they're going to need a punter. And he can kick it a lot. So I'd put Drew Miller in there. In mine. Trying to think. I think running back is a good call, whether it's Chauncey Bowens or if Nate Frazier commits to Georgia. I think he could have an immediate impact. And then the other one I would put in there is Ellis Robinson, because I think Ellis Robinson would have a chance to be a starter, like right off the bat. Like he's going to be able to compete, because I think Georgia's going to lose some players at that position to the portal. Trent, some guys may be frustrated not getting to play, and you're going to see Kamari Lassiter go to the league.
Yeah, and it's hard, saying he's severely underranked at 22. I think he is. So, Jed, do something about that, because I think he's a top 10 player.
Right. He's really good. He's very good, and like you said, that could even be like a Eric Stokes situation or Tyson Campbell. I might get those mixed up, but like by the end of the year, he could come on and be a full-time starter by the end of the year once he gets his feet wet a little bit, get some playing time, get some get some reps, and he could come on by the end of the year. I mean, he's a really, really, really good player.
And this player in particular, I don't think he's going to be a top 5 player, but I do think he's going to have a role on special teams, and that's Dwight Phillips. I think he's going to have a role on the team, whether it be punt return, kick return, or it be putting him out in the slot and playing a little bit. I think he's going to have a role as a freshman. I don't know what that's going to be, but that kid can fly, and he's a special talent.
No doubt. I want to share something real quick. Now that we've kind of talked about the 2024 class, I want to talk about this 2025 big board that we put out today. You can see it right here. We've got some commits on there, but it goes position by position and just lets you know the guys that Georgia is after. You see at the quarterback position, Ryan Montgomery. You got Deuce Knight, Antoine Hill, guys that Georgia's been involved with. This isn't necessarily done by preference by Georgia. We do put the commits first, but after that, we were just kind of going through and listing all in one spot guys that Georgia is involved in recruiting at those positions. You see if they're committed elsewhere, like Tavion Swint here from Kissimmee. Ryan Williams is committed to Alabama. They're involved there, but I think it's going to be a good resource for Vault members only. You have to be a member of UGA Sports to get access to this, and we're going to be updating it at least monthly going forward with the class of 2025 all the way until they sign. So it's a new feature we're putting out here, the big board. We've kind of found out this formatting. Trent could even use this formatting for his class prediction, to put it out there. So a new tool we have here at UGA Sports, and just wanted you guys to see it. Guys, looking at the big board today, just what are some, and I can scroll up and down, you just let me know, but what are some thoughts or some positions that you're kind of looking at here early as you look through the 2025 big board?
Yeah, I mean, you wonder what's going to happen. I'm intrigued by what you're at right there, Blaine, inside linebacker, because a lot of these offers are like fairly recent ones. I mean, obviously Jaden Perlotti is committed, but like Weston Port is a recent offer. Kelvion Riggins is a recent offer. Melendez is a recent offer that visited. So interested to see how that shakes out. And then running back too with Jabri Coleman. Jabri Coleman is a guy that kind of gets forgotten about because he's been committed for so long. He kind of surprised all of us when he committed over a year and a half ago. It's been a long time. And then there's so many names, Usman Chroma from Lee County, Jordan Davison from Mater Dei, Alvin Henderson, Byron Lewis, a guy, I forgot when I was looking over it the other night, Donovan Johnson, who is originally from Savannah, now at IMG Academy. That's another one that Georgia's really involved with. So those two positions, I think it's going to be interesting because those are spots obviously where you look to take 2 or 3 guys. There's a 1 commit already at each. 1, do the commit stick. 2, who are going to be the 1 or 2 other guys that end up kind of filling it out.
Trent, yeah, I mean, you look at these 2 running backs. You saw Chroma, down at the Future 50, and then Jordan Davison. He's the number 1 back in the class, I believe. So when you're talking about those 2 type of guys, Georgia is going to need to reload at that position as well. Like Jed said, tell everybody what you kind of saw with up close and personal with Chroma there.
Chroma is a stud that knows nothing about football, and it's nothing to get. But like literally, he told me that I was like, "Well, who did you follow?" Growing up, he's like, "I didn't really follow college football. I still don't." And he was like, "I don't know much about Georgia." He said, but he has had the opportunity to visit Georgia, and that relationship's building with Dale McGee. He had a chance to camp right before. I think he has 7-on-7. He talked about how he caught 6 touchdowns, I believe. This is a guy who had 2,000 yards last year, or right at 2,000 yards rushing. And, I think he told me what his reception was, 300, 400 yards. But, he is really, really good. And I know that several schools, Florida State's involved. There's several schools involved, but this is a guy who's going to have to go through the process to learn about these teams, because a lot of these kids come in and, they know about the team. It's more of an experience in the campus and getting that this guy's really starting new from a knowledge standpoint. And it'll be interesting to see who's able to build that relationship with him, because I think that's going to be the key is relationship with Chroma. But he's really, really good. Another position that we're looking at with all the offensive tackles Georgia took in this class is interior offensive line. SJ is a stud. He is really, really good. And I think that would be one of the main guys that Georgia's focused on. They got the connection, the Las Vegas connection out there on staff at Georgia. And, he came up with to a visit, told me he even thought about committing on that visit, but he wanted to go through the process a little further and take some more visits. But that is a guy who I'm looking at. He's really, really good, can play center, can play guard. Him and Justice Terry went head on several times, and those are 2 maybe for future. I think Justice Terry is a future 1st-round pick, but maybe future 1st, 2nd-round pick, something like that.
Mal Waldrop in this, he's a guy that Jed's going to end up bumping up a lot in the rankings before this is over with. He transferred from a small a private school in Georgia and Columbus over to Phoenix, Central Phoenix over there, and he's really going to get to put on display and get a lot more exposure how good he is. Georgia offered him immediately when he came for a workout over there. Stacey Searles did, and he's a guy who he's listed as offensive tackle, but he's going to play either center or guard, and maybe center when he comes over, and he's a guy that just plays with great leverage. He's nasty, plays through the echo of the whistle, all those good things that you like. So I think that is an interesting position there. I'm going to go back to the running back a little bit. A couple connection things I think people should know in 2025. Byron Lewis, American Heritage. Jed, this is a guy that Sony Michel has been closely involved with, talking to about the University of Georgia. So that's a factor that could play in there. And then Justin Baker, as much as people see Buford and they think, oh, well, that dynamic could change tremendously if KJ Bolden picks Georgia on August 5th. You got Dylan Raiola there that's going to be recruiting the crap out of those kids because he always is recruiting for Georgia, never stops. Jaden Perlotti is committed to Georgia in Justin's class. There could be a real change of how things go down at Buford there in a short amount of time. So I think that's an interesting deal. And then these receivers right here, Cameron Sparks and Marcus Harris, I've wrote pieces on them in interviews that I had with them recently. They're just not here for the negative recruiting against Georgia. Like people tried to talk to them about it, and they said, listen, we just don't think that's a that's a big factor in how we look at Georgia, because we know who Brian McClendon is, and we know what Georgia's going to do offensively, and we kind of just, see it for ourselves. So I thought that was an interesting piece. Our big board right now, it is not ranked by, preference or things like that. But as we go forward and we get, past September here with the contact date and things like that, when coaches can reach out directly to them, once we get into the fall, it will be a ranking type system that we utilize. And I think it'll be a great feature, guys, that we have going forward here.
Yeah. I mean, and I noticed on the left side, it says new. I mean, I'm assuming that's in the future.
Because they're new to that ranking that we made.
Moving up, down, stay the same, new additions, whatever. And a guy, the thing is, a guy we didn't even talk about on that list is the number one overall prospect in the class, Elijah Griffin, out of Savannah. Georgia's in a good spot with him early on. So as Georgia looks to keep rebuilding that room, that's going to lose a lot after this season. So, it's early, but it's not that early, man. It's like you said, Blaine, the contact period is a month and a half away, essentially, where coaches can start directly contacting that kids, and then it's on. I mean, this fall is going to be huge in terms of shaping that board, going into next year.
And just as we've already experienced now, we're about 9 months away from all these guys starting to commit in flurries. Okay. Cause we've seen that already, even less, 6 to 9 months away. So recruiting never stops, and it's going fast here.
Could you imagine a defensive line with Williams, Nwaneri, Elijah Griffin, and Justice Terry?
Yeah. It'd be
With
nuts.
an elder Jamal Jarrett and Nnamdi Ogboko in the middle.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It is insane. What Georgia's stacking up, there's a reason they won back-to-back national championships. So go from there. All right. As our guy Greg Rosenberg put out, hey guys, this might be the wrong place to ask, but my small business is having bookkeeping problems. Do you know any suggestions? Yes, thank you for the softball there. Presented by Julie's Bookkeeping. Check them out today. If you want a 30-minute free consultation, utilize godogs.juliethebookkeeper.com. That's I put it in the comments up there, and you can see it here scrolling across the bottom. godogs.juliethebookkeeper.com. Help out dog fans. They want to help you out as well. But guys, that's it for tonight. We've talked a lot about the 2024 class, dove into the 2025 class a little bit. Going to be an interesting finish to the month of July. We'll be back on Monday night on our regular time to see if anything goes down this weekend. I know we're in a dead period, but if not, we'll delve deeper into the 2025 class and maybe even talk about some 2026 guys, because Jed has a piece coming up on that. So for Jed May and Trent Smallwood, I am Blaine Gilmer. We will catch you guys next time. Make sure to hit that like button. That helps us out a lot. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Catch you guys on Monday night here on UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts.